How do you explain that you lost someone you never let yourself have? That the moment you think about every day is one where nothing happened? No fight, no betrayal, no scene. Just a night at a lake where a person leaned toward you and you stepped back and said four words that sounded like kindness and were actually the most selfish thing you ever did. I stood in that hotel lobby in a bridesmaid dress and finally understood what 10 years of being someone's best friend had actually cost him. And the worst part was not that he was marrying someone else. The worst part was that she deserved him. And I had been the reason, for a very long time, that he almost didn't let himself find her. My name is Isolde Vernet. I am 32 years old, and I am very good at being fine. That is not a complaint. It is a professional skill, the same way some people are good at math or languages or reading a room. I am an event coordinator at a mid-size hospitality firm, which means I spend my working life making complicated things look effortless in front of people who do not want to see the work behind them. And I am genuinely excellent at it. I am also, by most accounts, a good friend. Patient, generous, dependable, the kind of person who remembers what you said 3 months ago and follows up without being asked. I have been told I am easy to be around. I believe this is true. What I have never examined very closely is what I do, every single day, to stay that way. On the Saturday morning of Leander's rehearsal dinner weekend, I packed my maid of honor bag the way I do everything important, methodically, from a list. The silver dress Saskia approved in February, folded in tissue paper I kept from a gift someone gave me at Christmas. My toast notes, printed, not on my phone, because my phone is unreliable in ways a printed page is not. The small bag of rehearsal gifts Leander dropped off at my apartment 2 months ago, which I had been keeping on my entry shelf and dusting around without moving. I went through the list twice and felt the particular satisfaction of a person who has made sure nothing is missing. And then I opened the bedside drawer looking for a charger, and at the bottom of it, under takeout menus and a dead battery and a hair tie I did not recognize, was the earring. Single, silver, small. One of a pair from a night I have spent 10 years not thinking about, which means I have thought about it more carefully and more consistently than almost anything else in my life. The other earring is gone, lost in the grass of a lake house lawn in the dark, the night Leander leaned toward me and I stepped back and said 4 words that I have been calling wisdom ever since. I held it in my palm and looked at it. Not for a long time. Long enough. Then I put it on, the way you put something on when you have decided not to decide. I do not know why I did it. I told myself I hadn't gotten around to throwing it away, which was the same story I had told myself the last time I found it and the time before that, going back through every apartment I have lived in since I was 22. I zipped the bag. I turned off the light. On the bus to the hotel somewhere between my street and his wedding, I reached up and touched the earring without knowing I was doing it, the way you reach for something you have already decided you are not ready to let go of. I arrived 20 minutes early, which is what I always do, because arriving early means I am already useful before anyone has to ask. The venue coordinator had organized the welcome gift bags correctly. She was good at her job, I could see that immediately. But I reorganized them anyway, adjusting the ribbon alignment and re-angling the small cards so the names faced outward at a consistent angle. She watched me for a moment from across the table and then said she would be at the front desk if needed. I thanked her and kept adjusting. There is a particular kind of calm I get from putting things in order, from making a surface behave the way I want it to behave. I have always had it. It is the closest thing to peace I know how to produce on demand. Saskia came down to the lobby 20 minutes later in linen trousers and a cream top, her hair pinned up, looking like someone who did not need to arrive early because she had always been exactly where she was supposed to be. She hugged me, said it meant everything that I was here, and looked directly at me when she said it, with a steadiness I could not find an edge in. No small, unguarded space where I could calibrate how much she knew or wanted or feared. I said, of course, I wouldn't have missed it. She nodded once with a kind of precision that was not agreement and not skepticism, but something that sits between them and knows exactly where it is, and went to find Leander. I went to the bar to meet Mireille. Here is the thing about Mireille. She is one of the most honest people I know, and for most of our friendship that has been useful in a manageable way, because she tends to be honest about things I don't need to hide from her. On this particular Friday evening, she was 2 drinks in when I arrived, quieter than she normally is, with the specific stillness of someone sitting on something they have been sitting on for too long. I asked if she was all right. She said she needed to tell me something. Then she picked up her drink and looked at it. I waited. She put the drink down and said she thought Saskia knew things. I asked what she meant by things. She said she meant about the lake, about how I really felt, about what was actually behind 10 years of being someone's best friend in the specific way I had been his. I told her there was nothing to know, that the lake was 10 years ago, and that I did not understand why she was saying this to me the night before the rehearsal dinner, after she had already had 2 drinks and I had had none. She looked at her glass again with the expression of someone who has run out of a particular kind of courage. I signalled for the check, paid it, told her she seemed tired, and said good night with a hug that was warm and brief, and closed the conversation entirely. Back in my room, I read through the toast notes one more time. I added a sentence about how Leander's friendship had been the most constant thing in my adult life, read it back, and left it in. Then Leander called. He asked about the shoes for the venue floor and whether I had the gift bag he left with me, and I said yes to both. And then there was a half-second pause. One of those pauses that has existed between us for years, that we have always moved past without naming, that I have spent years pretending I did not understand the weight of. And he said he needed to ask me something before tomorrow. He said it carefully, in the measured voice he uses when he has practiced what he is about to say. He said he wanted to make sure I was coming to the wedding as his friend and not as anything else. I told him I didn't know what he meant. He said he thought I did. I told him I was there because I loved him, and I wanted the weekend to be everything it should be, and I was not sure why he was asking me this the night before his rehearsal dinner, when I had spent 7 months planning every detail of it, and had not once given him a reason to ask this question. My voice was even. It was always even. He said okay. He did not push further. Leander has never pushed. That has always been the most specific thing about him, the patience, the willingness to accept whatever I offered and wait quietly for more. For 10 years, I took that patience and called it proof that we understood each other in a way other people could not. Standing in the hotel room with the phone in my hand after he hung up, I felt the brief, clean satisfaction of having gotten through a hard moment without being touched by it. I went downstairs to the rehearsal dinner. In the lobby, I passed a couple arguing quietly about something that didn't matter, her hand on his arm, his head angled toward her even while they disagreed. And I watched them for a beat longer than was natural, long enough to register something I did not name. And then I kept walking. I stood up with my printed notes, and I was fine for the first 2 minutes. The first story was about soup. Junior year. I had a fever for 4 days, and Leander drove 40 minutes on a Tuesday night in exam week to bring me soup and a paperback thriller he said would be better than whatever I was watching on my laptop. He sat on the floor of my dorm room for 2 hours because I didn't have a second chair, and when he left, he said he would check in the next morning, and he did, at 7:15, before his exam, before his own coffee. The room laughed warmly at this. Saskia smiled. I felt the room with me and kept going. The second story was about the job interview. A coordinating role I was convinced I was underqualified for, and the 2 hours Leander spent on the phone with me the night before it, not reassuring me in the vague way people reassure you when they want to be helpful and don't know how, but actually going through every question I was afraid of and making me answer it out loud until I stopped flinching at the sound of my own uncertainty. I got the job. I have had it for 4 years. The room was slightly quieter during this one, but I thought that was attention, that people were listening carefully because the story was good, and I kept going. The third story was about the lake house trip, senior year. Not the night itself, just the day before. Sitting on the dock in the late afternoon with the water going orange, and Leander beside me with his arms on his knees, saying I was the most capable person he had ever known and the only one he had ever been afraid to disappoint. I said that was the kind of friend Leander was. I said that was the Leander I was so glad Saskia got to have. I raised my glass. The room applauded. Saskia raised her glass. Her face was composed with the stillness of someone who had prepared themselves for exactly this moment, and had prepared well. Leander was looking at the table. Ottilie was looking at me with an expression I did not immediately know how to read, though I would understand it completely by the end of the evening. Casimir was looking at the ceiling in the patient way of a person who has known the ending of a story for some time and is simply waiting for it to arrive. I sat down and felt, for 4 seconds, that I had done something meaningful and warm and worthy of the occasion. Then the 4 seconds ended, and I understood what had happened. It was not what I said. Every word was true, every detail accurate. Leander did drive 40 minutes. He did sit on the floor. He did spend 2 hours on the phone with me before the most important interview of my early career. The facts were right. What I understood, sitting back down with the applause still crossing the room, was what all 3 stories had in common. In each of them, Leander was doing something for me, seeing something in me, choosing me as the center of the scene. I had stood up at this man's rehearsal dinner and given 3 stories about his generosity that were, at their core, arguments for my own importance in his life. I had done it with genuine love and genuine blindness, and I had done it in front of everyone who mattered to him. And every person in that room except me had understood what it was while I was still speaking. Leander did not look at me for the remainder of dinner, not coldly and not visibly. He redirected with the natural attentiveness of a person who has decided where he belongs and is choosing it fully and publicly, without performance. He turned to Saskia. He answered his mother's question. He laughed at something Casimir said from across the table, and the laugh was real, which was somehow harder to observe than if it had been performed. He was present in every direction except mine, and it was not cruelty. It was completion, and watching it happen from 6 feet away was one of the most clarifying experiences of my adult life. I excused myself between courses. The coat closet was small and cold and smelled of cedar and other people's winter jackets, the faint papery smell of coats that had been hanging in a dark space since October. I stood in there and breathed. I put one hand flat against the wall and concentrated on the texture of it. The earring was still in my ear. I touched it without deciding to. Ottilie opened the door without knocking. She looked at me for a moment, not with pity and not with cruelty, but with the calm of someone who has been watching a situation long enough to have stopped being surprised by where it ends. She said, "He spent 8 years waiting for you to be ready." She did not say it unkindly. She closed the door. I stood in the cedar dark for 3 more minutes, breathing the smell of other people's coats, and then I went back to the table. Walking back down the corridor, just before the dining room doors, I stopped moving for 5 seconds. My face did one thing that I did not choose and could not stop. One of the waitstaff passed me with a tray, and I straightened and opened the doors and went back to my seat and asked the woman beside me whether she had tried the salmon. At the end of the night, Leander touched my arm briefly and said he would see me tomorrow. His voice was exactly the same as it had always been. Warm, easy, familiar. That was the thing. He had put me somewhere. He had placed me in the category of people he would warmly see tomorrow, using the tone of voice appropriate to that category. And I understood that this placement was not casual and not temporary. and was the most permanent thing he had communicated to me all evening. I got into the rideshare alone and did not speak to the driver, who did not ask. Outside the window, the city moved past, in the way cities move at night, lit and continuous, and not arranged for anyone in particular. I went to Saskia's door because I needed someone to accept a version of events and I had run out of other candidates. She opened it herself. She did not look surprised to see me, which told me something about what kind of evening she had been expecting. She listened to the version I had prepared in the elevator. I wanted to check if she needed anything, if the evening had felt right, if there was anything for tomorrow I could help with. And when I finished, she said the evening was beautiful. Then she said she had found the journal page 3 weeks ago. I asked what she meant. She said Mireille had sent her a photograph of a page from a journal I kept in college, dated the morning after the lake, which Mireille had found when helping me move apartments 2 years ago. She said she was not angry at me. She said, and this is the sentence I have replayed every morning since, not because it was designed to wound me, but because it was not, that she felt sorry for me, because Leander had spent 8 years being exactly what I needed, and I had spent 8 years making sure he understood that I did not need anything. She said goodnight. She closed the door. I stood in the corridor for a moment looking at the wood grain of the door, and then I went to the bar. Casimir was already there, sitting at the near end with a glass of something dark. He saw me come in, and he did not move to a different seat, which I registered as deliberate. He waited for me to sit first. The bar was mostly empty, a few hotel guests at the far end, a television showing something with the sound turned down to nothing. He told me without prelude that Leander had cried on the phone with him 2 months ago. Not about the wedding and not about Saskia. About the lake. About the morning after, walking back from the lawn, seeing one earring in the grass and understanding before a single word was spoken what my expression meant. Casimir said Leander called it the last day he tried. I asked Casimir why he was telling me this. He said because I was there and I should know what it cost. I heard it and processed it and then built, quickly and fluently, a version in which I was the person who had protected something valuable by making a clear-eyed decision a decade ago. I said as much. I said Leander understood at the time that the friendship was more important than a feeling that might have destroyed it. I said I had made a mature decision that was right for both of us, and that I believed he knew this. The words came out smoothly because I had been saying versions of them for 10 years. Casimir looked at me with the particular patience of a person who has stopped expecting to change something. He said I really believed that, didn't I? He finished his drink, set the glass down with a quiet sound on the bar, and went upstairs without looking back. I sat there alone for 10 minutes, listening to the low, ambient noise of the hotel, feeling the specific texture of a room that has no interest in you. Then I went upstairs and Mireille called. She said the thing she had not said in the restaurant. The photograph, Saskia's question asked directly and without softening. Her own honest answer, because honesty is the thing Mireille cannot abandon even when the timing is catastrophically wrong. The apology, which was genuine and which I believed, and which changed nothing. I said it was fine, Mireille. I understood. Good night. And I hung up and lay on the bed with my phone on my chest and the ceiling above me. After a while, I opened the toast notes on my phone. I found the sentence I had added that afternoon, the one about Leander's friendship being the most constant thing in my adult life, and I deleted it. I did not replace it with anything. The file was shorter. I put the phone face down on the nightstand and looked at the ceiling, which was white and smooth and gave me absolutely nothing back. At 1 in the morning, I sent Leander a text. Can we talk tomorrow before everything starts? He replied in 4 minutes. One word, yes. I put the phone face down again and closed my eyes and lay in the dark for a long time, listening to the buildings settle around me, a sound like the quiet exhale of something that has been holding itself together for years. He was already in the lobby. I went to his house the night before. That is what I have been trying to tell myself was something other than what it was. He had given me the address when they moved in. I had been there for dinners and planning sessions and twice just to sit in the garden and talk, the kind of easy visiting that happens when someone has been your best friend for a decade, and you have agreed, without ever negotiating it, that the shape of what you are to each other is permanent and will not be examined too closely. The garden light was on. He came to the door quickly, the way a person comes to a door when they have been half expecting the knock. He was not in his suit yet, just a dark shirt and jeans. The version of him I have always found the most difficult to be around, because it is the version that looks exactly like the person I knew at 21 before any of this accumulated. There is nothing formal in it to use as distance. I told him I loved him. I said probably always, in the particular way you love something you have organized your entire life around not admitting you need. I said the night at the lake I pulled away not because I was protecting the friendship, but because I was protecting myself. Because I had watched my mother spend 20 years wanting one person more than he wanted her. And I had decided at 15, at her kitchen table in October, that I would never be that person. And at 22, on a dark lawn with Leander leaning toward me, I had chosen my own safety over everything available and called it maturity. I said I was sorry it took 10 years, and the eve of his wedding for me to say it without a performance around it. It was the most honest thing I had said to another person in my entire adult life. It was also 9:45 in the evening before his wedding, and I knew that, and I said it anyway, because I had used up every version of myself I knew how to perform, and I did not know what else to do with what remained. Leander listened with his arms at his sides and his eyes on me. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, the way he is quiet when the words he is choosing are ones he wants to get exactly right. Then he said he knew. He said he had always known, in the way you know things about a person when you have paid careful attention to them across 10 years and they are very skilled at not saying the true thing out loud. He said the lake was the last time he asked. He said he understood that night, from the way my body moved before my voice did, what the answer was going to be, and that he drove home and spent about a month sitting with what that meant. He said he met Saskia 18 months later. He said by then he had learned that waiting for someone who was afraid of wanting you was not love. It was hope, and hope was something he was allowed to stop carrying. He said he was glad I told him. He said it changed nothing about tomorrow. He said all of this without cruelty, without the satisfaction some people would have taken from the moment, with the complete and unhurried clarity of a person who has already made his peace with something and is simply letting you watch him stand in it. I said, I never let anyone have all of me, and I'm not going to start now. I meant it as something solid, something that proved I was still intact. He looked at me when I said it, and in his expression I saw that he recognized the sentence, that he had been waiting for me to arrive at it, or something like it, for a very long time. He said he knew that too. He said it gently, the way you say something gentle to someone who has just explained, without meaning to, exactly why they are where they are. He walked me to the gate. I heard the garden light go off behind me 30 seconds after I reached the pavement. A car passed, indifferent. I walked the 12 minutes back to the hotel because I did not want to be enclosed with another person, and I did not want to be still, and I did not yet want to arrive anywhere. In the elevator, I pressed my floor and the doors closed and showed me a distorted, small version of myself in a bridesmaid dress with a single silver earring, and I looked at that person for 4 floors, and then the doors opened, and I went to my room and set 2 alarms and lay in the dark until the dark became morning. Saskia's sister's email arrived at 7:14 in the morning. It was polite. It was thorough. It explained that there had been changes to the formal program and that my role as toast giver at the reception would be filled by another member of the wedding party, and that the photographer had been updated regarding the formal portrait list, and that my day of coordination duties had been redistributed, and that I was warmly welcome to attend as a guest. It was written without a single unkind word, which made it the most complete and final document I have ever received. I read it twice sitting on the edge of the hotel bed in my pajamas with the morning light coming through the curtains, and then I put the phone down and got in the shower and stood there for longer than necessary, letting the water be very loud. Leander was downstairs when I came out of the elevator. He was in his suit, which is to say he looked like someone who had slept and eaten breakfast and was ready for the thing that was happening today. He asked me to sit with him for 10 minutes. He said Saskia had asked for the program changes and that he had agreed, and that he hoped I could understand why. He said I was important to him. And he said this slowly and precisely, the way he says things he means and wants to be received correctly. But that he needed to be honest about the difference between important and close, because he had not been honest about that difference for a long time, and it had cost him things he could not go back and recover. He said this last part looking at the floor between us. I understood what those things were. I nodded. He stood up, straightened his jacket, asked if I was all right. I said I was fine. He looked at me for a moment, one last moment, with the particular attention I have been the subject of for 10 years. And then he said okay, and went to find his family. I sat in the third row at the ceremony. Solveig was 2 seats to my right. We didn't speak before it started. When Leander and Saskia stood at the front, I watched them with the attention of someone committing something to memory they know they will only see once. Saskia laughed at something the officiant said. A short, completely unguarded laugh, the kind that arrives before you decide to allow it. And Leander turned toward her when she laughed, automatically without thinking, the way a person turns toward warmth because turning toward warmth is simply what they do now. That single reflex told me more than anything he had said to me in the garden. In the bathroom between the ceremony and reception, I told Ottilie it had been a perfect morning and that Saskia was extraordinary. Ottilie dried her hands on a white towel and said she was glad. Then she said, "The girl you were at 22 would have let him love her." She said it as a fact, not a wound, not an accusation, just an observation from someone who has had enough time to be certain of it. She set the towel down and left. I got my coat at 6 and took a bus home before the formal dinner, before the toasts Saskia's cousin gave in my place, before the dancing. On the bus, I deleted the calendar event that had lived in my phone for 18 months. Leander and Saskia, save the date. I watched the city go past the window in the early evening light, the same streets between his life and mine that have always been there, now meaning something slightly different in both directions. At home, I placed the earring on the windowsill, not in the drawer, on the sill where the city light could find it. I sat in my apartment at 10:38, in the same clothes I wore to the ceremony, with the kitchen light on and the city going on outside the glass. I thought about the sentence I said in the garden, "I never let anyone have all of me," and how certain it sounded, how much like a decision rather than a damage. I thought about my mother in her kitchen in October, and I thought about myself in a garden 12 hours ago, and I understood that we had done the same thing in different rooms at different ages and arrived at the same apartment, the same hour, the same phone that was not going to ring. She waited and called it love. I preempted and called it wisdom. We both ended up alone with the light on. I turned off the kitchen light. The earring caught the city glow once on the windowsill and then the room was dark. I went to bed. Tomorrow I will get up and make coffee and go to work and I will be fine, efficiently, with good posture, at a cost I have stopped pretending I don't pay.